Hi, I'm Connie Jones. I'm a professor in the Transformative Inquiry Department and have been for a long time, for 3 decades actually. And I would like to welcome you if you're an applicant to our program or if you're here simply to talk about self-inquiry with me, which is what I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. Our program is a completely asynchronous PhD program, which is a research degree. We also have a completely asynchronous leadership program, which is an MA program. And both of them, because they're asynchronous, it means that you do not have to show up at any one time with everyone else. So all of your work can be done on your own schedule. And that's very helpful these days, we understand, with people who have many things to do. So asynchronous is the first thing I'd like to say about our program. Secondly, we use a community learning model, which means that we bring in groups of people by class. Each year we have a group of people called a cohort, and they study required courses together, the core curriculum, and then they also have electives that they take inside or outside our department. So I'm teaching a course now in EWP, which is called East-West Psychology. And there are people from our department, from our PhD program, that are taking this course in East-West Psychology. There are people from the Philosophy and Religion department who are in the East-West Psychology department. They're called electives to those people. We have very specific required courses, but there are other departments like PCC, Philosophy, Cosmology, and Consciousness. Every single course is an elective. So there's no one course that must be taken, but we have a very different way of running our curriculum. In any case, so we have this asynchronous community learning based, totally online program, which is built around the graduate seminar model. So that, remember, when I was in graduate school, I was sitting around a big desk with the professor and the other grad students, and we were discussing topics. And that's basically what we do in our program. It's not a situation in which the professor cans a lecture and throws it up for everybody to watch, and then you write a paper at the end of the semester. No, you have to discuss throughout each week what's going on, what's the reading is for that week, and what other people have to say about it. Our program is transdisciplinary, which might not mean something to someone, but it means that everybody in our program does not have the same background. Everyone has an MA, but they don't necessarily have an MA either in social science or humanities or science. So we have a lot of people with diverse backgrounds coming into our transdisciplinary program. And that's kind of the glory of it, is that people are sitting next to each other that are quite diverse. We might have a psychotherapist sitting next to a person who's an engineer, sitting next to someone who's a fireman, next to someone who teaches at a Waldorf school. And all of these people are using the same curriculum, but they're going deeply into their own inquiry topics and they're sharing with each other. So we know that we have learned how to mine the depths of trying diversity in the classroom. Yeah. So learning community asynchronous, MA and PhD, and then you do something. Your dissertation topic in our program would be transdisciplinary, which means it's not bound by any one discipline. I have a degree in sociology, so I had to use sociology concepts and theories, methodologies when I was writing my dissertation. That's not the case in our program. We have a transdisciplinary model, so you can have multiple paradigms, you can have multiple methods, and you can have many, in fact, several theoretical perspectives. So all of that's transdisciplinarity, and we are finding that that's the very best way to serve our students.
Here, a quick thing, which is that even though it is asynchronous and even though we're all doing it on our own, that there is such a beautiful community and you'll have opportunities to have a deep dive with the intensive, right? So, and then you'll get to know your professors really well. And there's an intimacy to the program that you don't necessarily get even if you're in person at a university on, brick and mortar university, which CIIS is, but I think our program creates a certain kind of even more intimate in a ways where like if you are meeting, you're on Zoom and you're in each other's houses in a way. So it's really great.
Without question. I certainly didn't have any intimacy, and I was face to face with everybody. Yeah, but it was a long time.
I just want to say that CIIS is not kidding when they say that this is a transformative process, movement, experience. And no matter what program you're in, if you choose to be in a program, this is a life-changing experience. It's a rigorous experience, and I can't imagine anyone going through it and coming out as they were when they came in.
Just a good entree. It's a good segue into what I have to say. Because I titled this talk something like Self-Inquiry of the Researcher, I think. And I think most of us would say that if you're not in education to change yourself, if you're just here to learn about drones or corpuscles or doggy tricks or something, then you're really not getting the most out of education. So there's an esoteric notion that whatever happens out there there should be an isomorphic relationship with what happens inside. So if things are shifting out there, and things certainly are shifting out there in our country, aren't they? If things are shifting out there, things should be shifting inside us. And the whole question of what am I supposed to do in terms of my education, I would say grab the gusto and possibly try to find any transformative element that you can expose yourself to. You may decide in the end to drop it, but at least look into it. That's what I would say. So I would say education from the get-go should be transformative. Unfortunately, it's not. And we know people who comment on education systems. And I can tell you about the patriarchal system that I was brought up in and the highly individualistic blame, competition. I mean, the whole shtick, it was there all from the get-go. And my dissertation defense, which was an oral, I was lined up against 5 guys who were there to get me. You know, just bam, bam, bam. They had their guns aimed at me, and so it was really what was called a defense in those days. So it has changed a lot. You have sort of friends now that are on the faculty. They say you have a guide by your side instead of a sage on the stage. So everybody, I think, in our program understands that major shift in education. And the whole idea is that I, as a professor, am learning just as much as you are, maybe more. So the first point then is to say that all education should be transformative, and it all should include self-inquiry. And self-inquiry is something that's really the one responsibility you have in this life is to know who you are. It started in the West, well, before Socrates, but certainly Socrates is credited with that little phrase, know yourself, know thyself. And the whole Upanishads, which are prehistoric from East Asia, from South Asia, are in fact also prescriptions for how you look at yourself. So self-inquiry is at the root of Asian traditions. So that's one of the things that we study in another course I teach, which is self-inquiry in Asian traditions. And we do Advaita Vedanta and Zen and also Taoism. And the whole idea is that those cultures and those traditions are way ahead of the West. They've been doing this for thousands of years. We're catching up in the West. We're trying to catch up. It's going to take a long time. In any case, the scriptures that were actually received. I mean, one of the words in Sanskrit means received. The Shruti, the way the scriptures came to us means that they were heard. They were literally heard. Somebody didn't sit down and wait and make them up. So all of these ideas are kind of new ideas to us in the West, but we need to understand them. We need to take account of them. So self-inquiry, and what are we looking into? We're looking into who we are. And there's a responsibility that every person has by virtue of being human, and that is to know oneself. The problem, of course, is that we don't. We have two major problems. Those two problems are conditioning, which means that we rarely are asked to do anything for ourselves. We're really asked to take on what the larger society tells us are the meanings that will make life worthwhile. Those meanings come from what we call the worldview, the dominant perspective of the society, the dominant narrative. We could call it a paradigm. We could call it Western empirical science. We could call it positivism. You know what the dominant paradigm is in the world that you live in. And then we know that there are different ways of approaching other people. Right? There are cultural ways, there are regional ways, there are gender ways. All of these are ways in which we condition ourselves to do acceptable things in acceptable ways. So conditioning is pervasive, and everybody talks about conditioning. All the people who talk about transformation of consciousness talk about conditioning. Suchandra is in a contemplative order. Is that right, Suchandra?
I'm a nun in the Mahayana Buddhist tradition.
She's a nun
Yes.
in the Mahayana Buddhist tradition. So she has a perspective on how we look at conditioning. She has a perspective on how we look at transformation. So all of these organizations and mystical states, organizations that are organized around transformation, they all have a little different slant, but they're all kind of cohering around the idea that we have a problem with conditioning. Now, I'm teaching a course on Krishnamurti. He doesn't say that we can get rid of conditioning, and we don't need to, because conditioning is also how you learn to ride a motorcycle or drive a car or make miso soup. So you don't have to do every single thing with huge amount of attention. That's how conditioning works. But now the other side of the problem is a thing called identification. This is a little bit more insidious. It's a difficult thing to find in ourselves, to observe in ourselves. It comes from that notion that I am something. I am this person. And because I am this person and because I see certain things in a certain way, then I have an entree into the truth. So, for instance, I go out and somebody screams my name and says something to me that's a bit unsettling, then I am going to claim for myself that I saw that and I understood it. And so I own it. I own my observation and I own my judgment about that person and about what went on, when in fact I could be really, really mistaken. I could be mistaken about what the intent was on the other person's part. I could be mistaken about what I saw with the way the person moved their hands. I thought they were doing something disgusting, but in fact, they were just scratching their elbow or something. So there are all kinds of ways in which I own and I get attached to my image of myself. So the conditioning leads us to create an image of ourselves, and then we attach to that image through identification. Everybody else is identified. I'm identified. We're all identified. So in the end, what happens is that images interact with other images. Very rarely does a person interact with another person. We have to get beyond the images to have real communication between two people and not between two images. So we start out with that problematic. The problematique is that we are conditioned and that we have a problem with identification. And because of identification, it's very difficult to see that I'm really not this person and that I really don't own this thought. Krishnamurti is very clear about saying thoughts just come and go. They just sail around in the air. Sometimes they might alight in your head and you might think they're yours, but they're not necessarily yours. They're just thoughts that came into your head. So don't own them. And it's better when we're doing dialogue and we're trying to really communicate with people, it's better that we be tentative about what we think we know. Better to suspend judgment and suspend an evaluation. In fact, even say, I'm not even sure I know what I saw. So to be tentative means to keep one's real identity slightly separate from what one's observation and one's judgment is. Also, to suspend judgment means to remember, oh, I didn't really like what that guy did yesterday, but today I'm going to say, I don't remember that for a moment, or I'm going to suspend the evaluation that I have of that guy. Yeah. So those are kinds of ways in which we start to observe ourselves and we start to inquire into who we are using these two levers of conditioning and identification, and that are taught to us by everybody I know. I mean, certainly the Buddhist canon has ways in which you're supposed to look at yourself and see how the mind contains everything. And seeing reality is very much a part of projection of whatever our organizing principles are in our head. We project out into the world. Certainly Gurdjieff, who was an esoteric teacher, and if we have enough time, in the end, I'll go to how self-inquiry is invariably a part of an esoteric tradition of study, but that's later on. Okay, so we have inquiry, we have the value of living with a question, which is very important. When you live with a question, you open yourself. When you live with beliefs, you're closed. If I know, there used to be a bumper sticker that said, I found it. It was a right-wing Christian conservative notion that everybody's looking for the answer, and the answer is Jesus or something that's Christian, and I found it. So it had an exclamation point at the end. But the point was, I know what it is, and I found it. It's more important, I think, for self-inquiry to say, I'm not quite sure what I'm looking for, and I don't know if I found it, but I'm still looking. So to remain open is to have influences that are very good to touch me. Whereas if I say I've found it, I've settled on it, I've got it in a box, I don't have to look anywhere anymore, then I go into the world of belief. And that's one of the distinctions that we make between belief, which is sort of the notion that I can close my search because I know the answer, versus faith, which means I don't know what's going on. I don't know where I'm going, but I trust the process. And I think something's going to see me through. So if you have to pick faith over belief, I would say pick faith because it leaves you open. And the more open you can be, the more you can learn every day, which is a lot different from closing yourself into a box that already knows. Okay, so who is this person that's this self that's going to be inquired into? We go into a lot of different systems of what is the self. In the East, there's almost always this notion of a large impersonal self that resides over a non-dualistic frame, a non-dualistic paradigm or worldview in which everything is actually one, even nature herself and us. We're all one. We all partake in a certain kind of consciousness together. We're not all the same at all, but we partake in something that's identical. So that's very common in the notion of Brahman, which comes from Hinduism, or Buddha mind, or the Tao. So if you know these concepts of these impersonal forces that connect all of us, that's very important in all Eastern traditions. We actually have it in the West. We have it in Christian mysticism, especially in the thought of Meister Eckhart, and we certainly have it in Sufism, which is the esoteric side of Islam. So all traditions, if you look hard enough, I think will have these ways in which we can look inside ourselves and find a way in which I'm just like you, even though I don't look like you. And there are ways in which I confront the same challenges that you confront. Okay, well, let's talk about using attention and awareness. I'll let you know a little secret. Attending to something is almost a mystery and it's almost magic. I can take myself, I can put myself in a situation, and if I can watch myself very carefully, I can actually change the energy in the situation. And we have found that in esoteric studies, that attention is this mystical thing that can make opposites reconciled and bring inconsistent levels of social organization into consistency. That's one of the reasons why transdisciplinarity focuses on attention. If you read the Manifesto of Transdisciplinarity, the man who wrote it is Basarab Nicolescu, and he actually talked about how different levels of reality can be reconciled. Because if we take the scientific perspective, we see that one level of reality is inconsistent with another level, and there's no automatic way of how we would reconcile those inconsistencies. Whereas attention can bring what's called, in Gurdjieffian terms, the third force or the reconciling force that can make two opposites cohere, make sense of them. So that's a little introduction into how self-inquiry can be mystical, and it can incorporate cosmic levels as well as the level of my everyday life, which is another principle that's usually reflected in self-inquiry and attention. And that is that cosmic principles are also found within ourselves, intrapsychically. So esoteric teachers, for instance, will say, find the moon in yourself or find the sun in yourself, meaning find the function of the moon in the solar system, find the function of the sun in the solar system, and find something in yourself that revolves around your self-concept that can also be that stabilizing force in you. Now, this may be getting a little airy for you or a little woo-woo, which is fine. I mean, there's no reason why you shouldn't reject it. But just understand that it's the basis for this old hermetic notion, as above, so below. So if there's a cosmic principle that's going on in the universe in which Saturn and Jupiter and Mars are relating to each other in a certain way, maybe there is an isomorphic situation within me in which parts of myself serve as planets that also interact. So it may be a part of self-inquiry that you hadn't thought about before. So the whole idea of self-inquiry is to get us out of the bondage that conditioning and identification and buying the system as it's given to us, that is living our lives as secondhand people, getting us out of that and getting us to what we call a free attention. With the free attention, I'm not locked in. I don't have assumptions that put blinders on my face. I can now see everything. I can see how wonderful this deviant person could be, because this deviant person can have the answer to the problems of the day. Who knows? So the whole idea is that I'm not locked into a type of bondage, which actually happens when I don't see things as they really are, but I see only through my assumptions. This is one of the things Bohm says. If you don't examine your assumptions, then you don't see anything clearly, but your assumptions see. Your assumptions become the eyes that look out of your head, not you, not your real self. So these cells become multitude. I think everybody in any system would say we have multiple cells. We can divide them up in lots of different ways. In the East, they usually talk about this transcendent impersonal self. And then after that comes this maybe the larger self with the capital S. And then after that, the individual persons that are conditioned and socialized to be Connie and Lisa Joy and Julie. So we have different levels of reality, all of which are contained in one reality. It's called a non-dual worldview. So it doesn't really matter to me how you chop up these notions of the self, except to say that one thing we're not is unitary. And that's one of the things transformation always looks toward, is the unitariness. We should be working toward finding these separate parts of ourselves, the ones that conflict and compete with each other. You know, there's Connie, the brilliant sociologist versus Connie the dog lover versus Connie, who knows what. And all these parts can be vying for my energy and for my attention. So how do I compromise? How do I find nourishment for one eye and let the other eye kind of get incorporated into this other dominant eye? So we need to take the multiple eyes and reduce the number if we can, eventually to have one strong eye and to have one center of gravity in ourselves. So one of the things that you'll notice as you look in self-inquiry over time is that I don't have a center of gravity. My attention is almost always directed out. Whatever walks by my front door is what I pay attention to. Whereas I should be self-directed. I should be determined from inside. My inner vision should be the thing that possesses my energy. It tells me what I need. Not that I just give attention to whoever walks by the front door. So that's another important learning that comes from self-inquiry. So we talked about multiple selves, we talked about attention, and what happens with awareness? Awareness, of course, is that state that we are in, which can be quite close or it can be quite expansive. Some of us have had mystical experiences where we sit and there is no boundary to our consciousness. Our awareness is just everywhere. And so that's an expanded awareness that comes from, it's sometimes associated with mysticism because it's somehow not identified with any one or multiple things or persons. So it's important to see that if in fact I can be aware in a larger field, then I can see something more about the self, the non-Connie self that underlies my multiplicity, which is a real important part of all self-inquiry. I would say that as far as procedures go, Krishnamurti said there is no procedure. Truth is a pathless land. So anytime you're sitting on your cushion, saying a mantra, or doing your fingers in a certain way, or walking in a certain way, you're not doing the thing that Krishnamurti wants. No problem. Everybody doesn't have to obey Krishnamurti. There are other people like Gurdjieff and Buddhist traditions that have very specific steps, a lot of very interesting exercises that you can do to teach yourself something about self-awareness. So all you have to do is pick one system and try it out and pick another system and keep trying systems until you find one that works for you. And I would say in almost all the systems that I have been acquainted with that have a great deal to share, to teach me, one of the things that's most important is silence. And if you've tried silence, then you will know that silence has multiple levels. We start out with a great deal of conversation in the head, and that can be diminished over time so that the real void can be approached. And the Tibetans have three, they're Tibetan Buddhists, but they're also Tibetan Buns. That's the religion before the Buddhists got there. First is the silence, and the silence is what's related to the voice. Then there's also spaciousness, which is related to the mind. And then there's stillness, which is related to the whole body. So if we can learn to participate in stillness and spaciousness and silence, we can calm down the static that's always there. I don't know about you, but my mind is always going a mile a minute with rehashing memories and making plans and reacting to everything. That's one of the things about spaciousness and silence and stillness. Things get changed. Okay, so I don't know what else to say. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
This is Anne.
Yeah,
And
hey,
I don't even know what my question is, but what I'm thinking about is listening to you and talking about the mystical experiences and the stillness and the spaciousness. and the silence. And I guess what I'm interested in is where in our curriculum can we find courses that will help us discover these things outside of the core courses that we have? What are the electives that we can look at, or through what manner can we bring more of that into what we're learning here?
Well, it's hard. Not easy. It's even hard if you're taking the course whose topic is this. It's a hard thing, which I just realized. I'm looking at my notes. I realized I did skip something, which I'll go back to in a minute. I would say when you take a course, you're paying for something. I would get the syllabus. I'd look into the syllabus. I would call the instructor. I'd have a conversation. Just say, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm looking for. How close does your course come to touching on what I need? Just have a conversation before you go into the course. Don't assume anything.
Is there a course that is what you've been talking about?
Well, yeah, I'm teaching a course now. Krishnamurti, David Bohm, and dialogue.
Are you going to offer it again?
Yeah.
Good.
I'll offer it every other year. Next year, I'm going to offer the three orientations toward self-inquiry from Hinduism and Buddhism and Taoism. And then the following year, I'll do this again. I'll do the dialogue.
I've been getting information from a place called Paris. It's not Paris, it's Paris, about David Bohm talks. And I've been, do you get that one too?
Oh yeah.
Anyway,
yeah,
I've been really interested in that, and it keeps taking me back to thinking about you. Anyway, I don't want to take up too much time.
Just know that David Pete, who started Paris, was the great biographer of Bohm. And he's still, I mean, he's dead now too. So Bohm and Pete are both not with us, but that's where they're continuing this investigation into meaning and communication and silence and self, etc. All those things I've mentioned. Yeah, there are plenty of people from our program that go there. Yeah. And it's still a very active center. Yeah, so go, enjoy yourself. Now, what I did forget to mention was that there are two ways you can think about yourself, look at yourself. And you have to know the difference really in order to make a real transformative change. And one is to think about yourself. So we can think about ourselves now. We just had this conversation. I just had this conversation with Corey the other night. You can think about yourself forever. I can think about myself every minute of every day for 10 years and never see myself. Do you understand the difference? When I think about myself, I think, okay, Connie, and I make up a story and I investigate the story and I identify with the story. And I am the story. There's no space between me and the story. And that gets me nowhere because I haven't seen myself. I've just rearranged and massaged my images of myself. Now, to perceive myself, let's just say somebody comes by and screams my name in front of my house, and I immediately just fly into a rage. But I just turn in that instant for 1 degree, and I just see myself in the rage. And I see where the rage comes from. The rage comes from my own insecurity about who I am. And this looks like a pretty important person that's coming by my house screaming my name. What's going on here? Well, immediately I see that I am hardwired to defend an image of myself, which only I have bought into. I mean, this person, who knows what this person is? But it's so inconsequential what just happened. And yet it has taken me. It has taken my body, my emotions, and my mind, which is another part I should emphasize too, is that we're not one faculty. We're 3 different bodies. And Gurdjieff called them 3 different brains. And my emotions are so fast. I can be in this reactionary anger fit before my mind even knows what's going on. My mind will say very slowly, oh, I have just been insulted. But I'm already in the fight and flight. I'm already there. I'm already pumping the adrenaline. Because we have to see that we have 3 major tempos in everybody. Everybody has this. We have the structure of the body, which is pretty fast, but the emotions are 30,000 times faster than the body. And they're both 30,000 times faster than the mind. The mind is the slowest of them all. And to see that your emotions have already taken you off in a certain direction, they've already ruined your day, and your mind just hasn't caught up. It doesn't have a clue. So I'm just trying to make a point here that there's cognition, where you think about yourself and you make up stories and you talk about yourself and you can tell people stories forever. And perception, which is where you see yourself in the moment. Seeing yourself in the moment is what dialogue is organized around. It's not making up a story about yourself. It's not thinking about yourself or talking about yourself or writing about yourself ad infinitum. It's seeing yourself in the very moment and seeing how this automatic stuff comes up. It's connected to an image of myself, or it's connected with a scary, maybe I don't even have an image. Maybe I just have a fear of no image, but it's somehow connected with something that's emotional. But I don't see that because I think it's the truth. You see, I just say, oh, this guy's a jerk. He walks by, calls my name. No wonder I'm upset. I should be upset. It's his fault. So seeing that perception is different from cognition is a huge lesson to learn. And it's very hard to see ourselves perceptually, to see ourselves in the moment. But that's what you're asked to do in dialogue. That's why we spend almost 2 full months studying the principles of dialogue before we even sit down to do dialogue. Otherwise, everybody would just be talking about themselves. Let me tell you about myself. Let me tell you my story. And then they wouldn't be doing anything that's called perception. They would be doing only cognition. It's not an easy thing. And you won't find anybody anywhere. Well, you won't find too many people talking about it because it's hard. It's very, very difficult. But people will tell me your story.
Mm-hmm.
They write your story, think about your story, rehash your story. Oh, that we love to do. And we love to suffer through our stories. We like our suffering. Yeah. Our suffering.
We keep it alive through our stories, right?
We keep it alive. We get to massage it. We get, it's the gift that keeps giving. Suffering and suffering and suffering. So why is it that I want to continue suffering in this way? It must have something to do with perpetuating this image of myself to myself. You probably already know that I've got a fake image of myself, but I don't know it because you can see stuff in me that I can't see. I have buffers and defense mechanisms. I have a whole what is it called? Armatorium, something where our armory, where all my mechanisms are stored. I have a lot of them, and I'm an old person, so they've been building up for a long time. But you can see them, you can cut right into that and say, Connie, you're not making any sense on this one. And I can do the same for you. That's one of the reasons we need each other, because I can see where your defense mechanisms are keeping you uninformed. And you can see the same about me. You can see that I am not being honest with myself. And how is that? Who else wants to contribute?
Was in the predecessor to transformative studies, in as much as I was a graduate of transformative learning and change.
Right.
So
we've morphed. Yeah. We have what's called the TLC program, Transformative Learning and Change. And we had a lot of graduates like Martha and many others.
But I really, all of you who have the chance to work with Connie have a fabulous opportunity. And I highly recommend, if you're not in the program, I highly recommend the program. Mm-hmm. And it is definitely transdisciplinary. And it was just a delight to be there.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Anybody that's considering about coming into our program should have a nice little interview with a current student. I mentioned this to somebody because I'm on the admissions committee, so I interview people. And this man said, well, what a great idea. I should talk to a student. I said, yeah, before you commit to 4 years of paying and studying, why don't you talk to somebody like Lisa who will tell you what it's like to be a student in our program?
I will.
Yeah, yeah. So pretty important. I mean, it's a big deal. Well, okay, so my hour is almost up. I'm happy to discuss anything you'd like to.
Can
Or
I
I would-
just second Martha by saying that anybody who is wise enough to grab the opportunity to sit and dwell in Connie Jones' presence, it's the gift that keeps on giving. A gift of a lifetime, or many lifetimes, if that's something that's part of your belief system.
Well, this is not supposed to be a commentary on me, but these are some people who are very wise.
And Connie, I'd like to say that we come from completely different backgrounds, me with my earth-based spirituality. And there was never any question that those paths literally crossed. So
Beautiful. Very good point. Yeah. I think what nobody can really quite get what we get from each other. We get so much. Like here's Alana, who's, into Ayurvedic medicine and potions, and she's into this stuff where this, I don't even know what you call it, but it's non-empirical, isn't it, Alana? I mean, it's something that most of us don't understand.
You're an
And so you got
alchemist,
that,
Mary.
and then you've got somebody like Martha who's graduated in goddess spirituality, and all these ideas are coming together. And somebody like Lisa Joy who's studying, I don't know if you even call it a disability. What do you call it? A challenge, a neurodiversity? Is that it?
That's a term that's being used more and more. I'm actually in favor of people determining for themselves what works and what fits for them, because there's so many different labels flying around. And what I found through transformative studies is that science is an open system and we are an open system. And I think we can pick and choose from what's out there and come up with our own ways of self-identifying around that. My own ways of identifying have shifted and changed in several ways over time. I just really feel like we can all reveal our gifts and our talents. And I think it's like there's always a constellation of strengths and challenges. And, the labels can be helpful, but sometimes not.
Yeah. But I mean, that's a pretty big diversity right there. Just talking about you three folks and what you do, what you have
I
done.
like biodiversity. I think diversity is good for humans. Inclusion is good for humans, and
and we see what the threat to diversity at the national level is bringing about.
yeah,
We're terrified. I mean, we're shocked. Yeah. We're really shocked into something.
We shouldn't be afraid.
Yeah.
Thank you, Connie.
Well, actually, maybe having you all talk about your own particular modes of nourishment in our program has been more important than having me think about it, because it's really not a set of ideas that get ticked off, but it's really your experiences where you talk about what happened to you. And I mean, I could bore you forever. I could tell you what a real patriarchy, what a real PhD under a patriarchy is. I didn't get to choose my own dissertation topic. I didn't get to choose my own dissertation chair. I didn't get to choose my own dissertation committee. And I had to take these guys, 6 guys shooting me, trying to take me down. So, I mean, that's just not anything that you would find in our department or our school.
Connie, can I say something real quick? I know our time is coming to a close, but you said something really profound, and that, well, everything you say is profoundly nourishment. But what I want to say is, you mentioned we need each other, and my takeaway from that is in ways to collaborate and brainstorm and just communicate, if we just do those things, needing each other is just so lovely.
But, we can't just collaborate. We got to collaborate with some clarity, because, you know, if I don't, at the same time I'm talking to you, trying to communicate and collaborate, if I'm not just trying to be vigilant about seeing what baggage I'm bringing to the room, then I can mess up our communication, can't I? Yeah. And so if I'm at the same time trying to talk to Debbie, then I'm trying to say, oh, Connie, what did you just see in yourself? You know, what was that reaction? What was that response? It was very unrealistic, Connie. And so I can kind of delve into my own stuff that's going on at the same time. And I won't take up your time, right? I won't do something that's not nourishing for you. So yes, collaboration is extremely important. We collaborate in every course around every assignment. Yeah. Thank you, Debbie. That was perfect.
There's also the taking collaboration. Debbie and I do a lot of work together and moving into co-creation. And it just hit me, Debbie, that this whole idea of co-creation is like an alchemical process where you put the things in the cauldron and see what emerges.
There you go. Well, yeah, I never quite got around to the esoteric side either, which is what that is. Because the esoteric, do you know what a retort is? A retort is a bottle or container that you hermetically seal. You seal it off and you put certain things in there, and you get a organic, I don't even know the right words to use, but you get a chemical physical change. And that's what a retort is. I mean, everything gets kind of shifted around. It's what alchemy is about, isn't it? Well, that kind of shift not only can occur in a retort, but you and I can be the retort too. So we can actually find that our attention can shift the actual stuckness of our position, of our value system, of our images. Things can morph, things can change, but the real change agent is the attention. And the attention can, once it's applied, it brings a certain energy, a certain consciousness to whatever's there. And so there's a way in which I can actually be my own transformative agent. Yeah, so so thanks for bringing up alchemy. And this, the whole notion of that I wanted to make this other distinction too between esotericism, which is the idea that you change yourself and transform, versus religion. Religion is a set of beliefs. It's an institution in society. It's a bunch of stuff that you do. There's nothing wrong with religion, but it doesn't demand that you be transformative, whereas esotericism demands it. Esotericism is based on self-inquiry, self-study, and this whole question of what does it take to have an alchemical transformation in the person? Well, it takes an understanding of the emotions, the physical body, and the mind. If you have only an understanding of one and not the other two, you're not going to make it. It takes a lot of complicated investigation.
Connie, can I ask you, I'm really curious if you can expand upon when you're speaking about attention and it's shifting your energy. I kind of want to connect it to your experience you shared with doing your doctorate with basically a very intense patriarchy around you. I'm curious how this attention was able to be a form of self-defense in the face of external forces, essentially diminishing opportunity or the choices. Oh, they're basically trying to eliminate your choices. I'm wondering if you could speak to that, please.
Well, it was so long ago that I was unconscious. I was totally unconscious. So I didn't glean what I could have gleaned now. If it were to happen to me now, I would make a change. I mean, I wouldn't go through it again the way I went through it. But of course, I just took their definitions. You know, I was just this witless woman who was studying in a man's field, and I was taking their statistics exams and their methods exams. I was taking all their goofy exams, and you know, they were just giving me negative feedback. Not negative, they were just sort of overlooking me and diminishing my contribution to scholarship. Anyway, so I just had to go through it. I just thought, well, anyway, I won't go into all that, but how I got through it was I just got through it. I put my blinders on and I put my armadillo shell on and I got through it. I mean, I did what they told me to do. Now I don't think I would do that. I think I would raise Cain or whatever one does for changing the system. So, you know, that's also an alternative that everybody has. You can go through anything unconsciously, or you can go through and try to bring some consciousness to it. But this was so many decades ago that I didn't even understand what was going on. I just thought it was the system. I thought the system was reality. There weren't options. Now I know that there are options. But I had my way paid, so I didn't exactly have the proclivity for changing the system because the system was giving me a free education at the moment. Now I would look different. I would look at it differently. And it was before the women's movement, even. It was way before the women. It was in the 70s, late 70s, that I got my PhD. So when the women's movement came, everything changed. So I would say if you think that the system is not serving you, Corey, have a chat with people like me. Let's talk about it. Let's get down and look at the alternatives here. Because there are more alternatives now. There really are. Anybody else?
Thank you for your generosity in giving this talk.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Yeah, thank you. Thank you all very much. Thank you.